Hello, and welcome to David Bowles' Be a Human Meme. In today's podcast, we're going to discuss veneration in death. And we'll take a look at it in three areas: scope, magnitude, overreaction, and finally, proper veneration. Death is a part of each of us. It's riding down to capture us sooner than we'd like, and always galloping towards us. And so we are left to our emotions in reaction when we have to spend our humane capital dealing with the death and deaths surrounding us. Scope. How much do we grieve, and should we grieve? What is appropriate? Where do we draw the line between respect and ridiculousness? Yes, we allow each other their grief, our grief, shared grief, but there must be context and perspective in order to shed the proper meaning. A death of a personal friend or family member deserves a markedly different response cry than dealing with the public death of a stranger you may have admired but not really known. Examples: Princess Diana. Overreaction. The world mourns. A nation mourns. But why? Because she's famous? Because she's beautiful? She wasn't really the heart of the nation. There are many factions in her own country who did not respect her. Yes, she was pretty, and she was betrayed by an uglier husband. But did she deserve the sort of veneration in death that she did not really have in life? Prince. Recent death. Overreaction. An odd man, talented, but in the end we learn a drug addict. Amy Winehouse. Overreaction. Tossed away her life for an addiction. Are we to pity her, mourn her? Do we fear we could become her? These are questions that make us wonder about how and why we mourn the loss of people we don't really know. Michael Jackson, overreaction, surrounded himself with yes people who were unwilling, unable to tell him no. And then there's John Lennon, a proper veneration in dying. He died too young and on the wrong side of a handgun. He defined a generation. He was truly, in evidence, a righteous man. Why do we mourn these famous strangers? Why do we feel it is necessary to weigh in on our private grief in public, and now especially on social media? Are we seeking reconciliation with life, or are we just attention-seeking on the back of a funeral train? Overreaction cheapens genuine grief. When strangers wail for the dead they did not know, the intimate grief loses its private privilege for those who are really and truly in mourning. And that loss of magnitude is felt and quantified. The purpose of grieving is to come to terms with the loss of the life and to begin the slow and painful process of filling a large hole left in the soul. That's not a public task. It's a painful personal trial that we all must judge and abide. Veneration. We think of popes and saints, any child dying young, victims of violence, terrorism, soldiers in combat, all correct, all proper, all righteous in context. But what about the revered athlete? Are football players more important than combats, veterans who were killed in combat? Let's think about the Midwest. several years ago, there was an unfortunate airplane crash, and one of the football players was killed in that crash. And because of his status as a member of the football team, a bronze statue was created of this player standing next to the venerated head coach outside the football stadium. Now, is that too much? The player was not really a superstar. He may have won an important game or two, but he wasn't legendary, except for the fact that he died too young in a plane crash. The reaction from the fans was a little out of condition with the reality of the death. And now we're met at the same Midwestern school with news of a football kicker killed in a car accident. Now, the world is on fire. He wasn't killed in the stadium, not killed working out. He was killed in bad weather traveling to or from a football kicking camp. But from the reaction of the fans of this football team, you really do think the entire universe is now ablaze with wails of mourning and sorrow. And the state itself is in complete mourning. And not, I argue, for the loss of life, but for the loss of a football player and what that means to the future of the win-loss schedule in November. The Midwest mourns not the body, but the role of the body on the field of play. Now, as a Midwesterner, I can say this without shame. Midwesterners can be shallow and volatile when it comes to the living veneration of their football team. But expectation must be tempered. There's a larger world out there. There is currently a Kickstarter campaign to create another statue of this football kicker who was killed in a car accident. So it may be placed outside the football stadium, and people can go and pay their respects to this kicker. And I just wonder, really, where are the statues for the children of Sandy Hook? Where are the statues for the lives lost in Hurricane Katrina? Where are the statues and the whole state veneration for those felled by police violence and by violence against the police? Well, those lives don't count. Only the helmet and the shoulder pad count, because they bring belonging and pride and income to a university. I get it. I'm a graduate of a Midwestern land-grant university. And I remember meeting some people in Washington, D.C. after I left the Midwest, and the first thing they said, disdainfully and with a look on their face, about my college was that, it's just a football school. I was perplexed, maybe slightly wounded, but that too I understood. The entire identity of the state is wrapped up in a football uniform, not academia. Now, I did well in that football school as a non-athlete, and I made a lot of things happen with the help of dedicated faculty and multi-talented peers, and I'm delighted about the time I spent there. But nobody really cares, because the pigskin will always precede the predicament, because that's the way the fans want it. Fans want to lead with their kicking foot and not their enlightened mind. They desire the brand and the logo over the paper and pen. They venerate the player in bronze instead of the monuments of flesh, in the flesh, of the everyday student who rises above the cornfields and the fodder to make a new life and who is able to hew a right quarry stone to get ahead. So the Midwest will always rise and fall with the success of the football team. But I hope, moving forward, that they are able to go beyond the yaw of their limited experience and life expectancy to realize there is a bigger and badder world out there that the rest of us deal with on an everyday occurrence. A year ago, a person was murdered in cold blood 30 yards from my front door on the east coast of America. Shot dead. In the gutter. There was a candlelight vigil for the fallen, but no bronze statues, no state of mourning for the dead, just tremendous grief and residual fear in the neighborhood, and a sense of capacity and scope and conviction and a sense of the horizon when it comes to evaluating a life against expectation. To venerate a college football kicker over a dead child or an ordinary death in the gutter is unseemly. We live in a global world where nobody's grief is above anyone else's, but we must react with the proper magnitude in context. We allow each other our mourning, but not at the expense of those who may deserve it more. Attention is thin today, and when an over-the-top wailing moment of grief over a lost kicker takes the spotlight and the news and the fresh cycles of mourning, the rest of us are made paler in the realization of the overreaction. A decade ago, I wrote about this topic, qualitatively and quantitatively, in The Stations of Urban Mourning. I invite you to read my piece. Head over to bowlesbooks.com. Click on the Publications tab to read the article for free. The link is on the bottom of the page. 3 deaths within 3 blocks of each other in Jersey City, New Jersey. You'll read about it. No statues. Nobody remembers. Few care to be bothered to be reminded. Thank you for joining me. Please, be a human meme.